This is Business Week Armenia, CivilNet's weekly business digest. Here are this week's top stories. A number of banks in Armenia have stopped processing international money transfers via Russia's Unistream just days after the U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned the Moscow-based company. Armenian Bank and Eneco Bank have halted Unistream transfers entirely, while Converse Bank and Armenian Bank have introduced new limitations that allow Unistream users only to transfer Armenian drams or Russian rubles. Those are some of Armenia's biggest banks. In response to a CivilNet inquiry on the matter, Armenia's central bank said, "Banks manage their own risks and make their own decisions." A number of large banks in Georgia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan have also reportedly stopped processing Unistream transfers in recent days. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year, Armenia, Georgia, and other former Soviet countries in Central Asia have all seen unprecedented inflows of Russian cash. According to official figures, Russian citizens transferred more than $3 billion to Armenia last year, a year-on-year increase of more than 300%. Information on how much of those transfers were made via Unistream has not been made available to the public. The move to halt Unistream transfers comes as Armenia's financial sector appears to continue tightening export controls on Russia. Last month, a number of Armenian banks started to block Russian companies from making payments for imports of microchips and other electronics. Trade between Yerevan and Moscow nearly doubled to top $5 billion last year, raising questions about Armenia's role in supplying foreign-made products to the world's most sanctioned country. Armenia's Economic Activity Index, a measure closely corresponding to GDP growth, grew by 11.4% in the first half of this year, according to preliminary data out this week from Armenia's Statistical Committee. The numbers suggest Armenia's double-digit economic growth last year has continued largely unabated into this year. Last year, Armenia's GDP grew by more than 12%, exceeding expansion rates in all other former Soviet countries in the South Caucasus and Central Asia regions. After the war in Ukraine began, more than 100,000 people migrated from Russia to Armenia, a massive boost for the country's relatively small economy. Senior Armenian officials have indicated much of last year's growth was directly or indirectly connected with those massive inflows of Russian labor and capital. The figures for the first half of this year show much of the growth is being driven by booms in trade, services, and construction. In contrast, industrial and agricultural output barely grew from January through June, raising concerns over the sustainability of Armenia's economic growth if or when the Russian migrants leave. Armenia's central bank is forecasting the country's economy to grow by nearly 7% this year. Armenia's 1,000 biggest companies paid about $2.3 billion in taxes in the first 6 months of this year, according to the latest top taxpayers list by the country's State Revenue Committee. The Zangezur copper molybdenum combine, Armenia's largest mine, took the #1 spot, paying about $90 million in taxes in the first half of this year. Gazprom, Russia's state energy giant, took the #2 spot on the list at about $80 million in taxes, while Grand Tobacco, an Armenian cigarette manufacturer, took third at about $52 million. Just those three companies together were responsible for nearly 10% of Armenia's total tax revenues. Firms involved in mining, energy, tobacco production, and banking dominated the rest of the top spots. The number of banks on the top taxpayers list has grown noticeably since last year, when Armenian banks began making record profits amid massive inflows of Russian cash. And as always, please follow CivilNet for the latest news and independent reporting from our contributors on the ground in Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh, and the region.